And this is Mission Control Houston. We're now able to bring you a replay of that hatch closure from inside the station while the crews said farewell to each other for the last time in space. Kotov, Ryazanskiy, and Hopkins loaded into their Soyuz TMA-10M spacecraft. Why don't we take a quick look at that right now? So right here you can see in the foreground the three departing crew members, Sergey Ryazanskiy on the left there, Oleg Kotov in the middle, and just floating to the back in the gray jumpsuit is Mike Hopkins. The three were loading into their Soyuz TMA-10M spacecraft. You see Mike Hopkins, NASA astronaut, giving a quick wave farewell there. The astronauts loading into the craft. This view from inside the Poisk module in the Russian segment. There, Russian cosmonaut Sergey Ryazanskiy giving a quick smile before he loads in. Ryazanskiy will be in the left seat of the craft, Hopkins in the right seat. And in the center will be departing Expedition 38 Commander Oleg Kotov, giving a quick hug there to Koichi Wakata, the now commander of the International Space Station, who will remain on board for Expedition 39. Kotov now there, moving into the spacecraft from Poisk. As the Russian cosmonaut on board and the commander of the Soyuz, he'll be in charge of the craft during its descent. You can see some of the Sokol launch and entry suits tucked just to the lower left of the craft. There, Kotov and Ryazanskiy giving the final wave goodbye before Kotov will now reach up and prepare that hatchway for its final closure. Again, this happening earlier this afternoon at 3:58 p.m. Central Time. You see Kotov on the left, Mike Hopkins in the middle, a little towards the back, and Sergey Ryazanskiy on the right, waving goodbye to Mikhail Turin, Rick Mastracchio, and Koichi Wakata, who will remain on board. Right here, the hatch of the Soyuz craft closed officially, again at 3:58 p.m. Central. That hatchway connecting the craft right now to Poisk in the Russian segment. Here you can see Mikhail Turin closing the side on the International Space Station. And now the craft conducting a series of leak checks, the crews on board ensuring the integrity of their spacecraft as they continue to move towards the next major milestone of tonight's events, which will be the undocking of that Soyuz TMA-10 from the International Space Station. And so the command to undock has been given.
How's the view? Thank you. We can see you with interference, but we can see.
Олег, как вы себя картинку наблюдаете?
Oleg, how's your view?
Четко, отчетливо.
No issues. Clear.
Хорошо, спасибо.
Copy. Thank you.
Right now, the hooks holding the vehicle in place beginning to retract. Should have physical separation in just about 30 seconds or so. This view again, a camera on board the Soyuz craft pointing at the Poisk module to which it's currently docked.
Are you ready here?
Есть отхождение.
Have separation. 30235.
And physical separation confirmed.
Copy.
Confirmed at 7:02 p.m. Central Time. Well, the station in the Soyuz craft, which is now no longer attached, we're flying about 261 statute miles over northern Mongolia.
Smooth separation. Copy. Looking good.
Олег, 0306.
030620. Via command link.
Вас понял,
I copy.
20 КРЛ, УДР.
ODR via command link.
Again, separation confirmed. On this camera view, if you look in the lower left corner, that bottom number is the rate of departure. As you can see, just a little over a tenth of a meter per second right now.
Copy.
Hoist module coming into view, along with much of the rest of the Russian segment. And physical separation confirmed just about 2 minutes ago at 7:02 p.m. Central Time. Now just about a minute or so away from the next step, which will be the separation burn, in which thrusters on board the Soyuz will fire for about 15 seconds to increase the rate of departure from the station for the craft by a little over half a meter per second.
Не забудь потом снять.
Don't forget to remove it later.
Хорошо?
Okay.
Тут самое интересное проходит. Солнце прям было. Конечно. Телескоп стоит.
Easy.
Кто его поставил? РК-21.
Unintelligible.
Ожидаем включения двигателя на...
Waiting for thrust activation. Yes, copy.
И включение двигателя.
We have thrust activation.
Наблюдаем.
Visiting vehicle officer here in Houston confirming the separation burn has begun. Thrusters on the Soyuz now firing to increase its rate of departure from the International Space Station. Reports confirming the thrusters performing as expected.
Пока станция.
We still see the station. Bye-bye station.
Хорошо, ОДР, нашел ОДР.
ODR complete. Well.
Да, ОДР пошел. Давайте заключительная операция.
Deactivation for operation.
Да, выдаем Е1. Уже выдал.
Issued.
Ага, хорошо. Так, и тогда формат сворачиваю тогда.
And just now, as you can see, we're getting a view now of that Soyuz craft. Already well on its way away from the International Space Station. The craft successfully undocked a little over 20 minutes ago from the Poisk module. We'll stick with it as long as we have a decent view of the craft. Inside there right now, Oleg Kotov, Sergey Ryazanskiy, and Mike Hopkins on their way back down to planet Earth after spending 166 days in space and on board the International Space Station. This view right now coming from you right as the International Space Station and the Soyuz just passed over Hawaii, now out over the Central Pacific Ocean. And there we have it. The visiting vehicle officer here in Houston reporting the search and recovery forces have reported touchdown. There you see the central screen in Kazakhstan, or in the Russian Mission Control Center, reporting they have landed. Hopefully we'll get some video soon from the Russian forces down there on the ground. Again, that landing time right at around 10:25 p.m. Central, being confirmed by search and recovery forces on the ground in Kazakhstan. At this point, the search and recovery forces were still preparing to extract the crew. You can see them off to the right there, building the extraction stand that gets fitted over the top of the Soyuz craft, which this time happened to land upright. Not uncommon for the craft to also land on its side, but in this case it did land upright. There the stand constructed.
Rotate it, please. A little more, turn it around a little more. A bit more. Turn around a bit more. The hatch is opening. Where do we put it to? Attention. Hold him. Central seat.
Now you see Oleg Kotov being removed from the central seat of the Soyuz craft, the first one out, carried over to his chair, waiting by the search and recovery forces.
Back into the chair.
And Kotov was in the center seat of the descent module, the commander of the Soyuz craft during its descent for all of stages from undocking all the way through landing. Next out was Sergey Ryazanskiy, another Russian cosmonaut, going down the retrieval slide there into the waiting arms of the Russian recovery forces. Ryazanskiy was the board engineer on the Soyuz craft, and he was seated in the left seat to Kotov's left inside of the Soyuz, and he was responsible for backing up Kotov throughout all of the operations for tonight's landing.
118/77.
Ryazanskiy wrapping up his first space flight. Was a rookie back in September, but a rookie no more, having 166 days spent in space now. And then last but not least, getting out of the Soyuz craft, NASA astronaut Mike Hopkins.
He's there.
You can see him coming down off the Soyuz craft, being carried over to his waiting seat, big smile on his face. Mike Hopkins also completing his first space flight.
Move over here.
But again, as you can see, all the crew in good spirits, despite landing in pretty frozen conditions out there in Kazakhstan. The temperature in the single digits are right around 0 Fahrenheit for these recovery forces. As much as 6 inches of snow on the ground. You can see making getting around a little bit more difficult than usual, but this has kind of been the norm for quite a few landings in the March time frame in Kazakhstan. The crews well exercised and well able to adapt to these conditions to safely retrieve the crew from their Soyuz vehicle. Soyuz itself able to land very rugged spacecraft, launching and landing in fairly unusual conditions, high wind, precipitation, snow, and low visibility. Right now, continuing to bring you live video from the landing site of the Soyuz TMA-10M vehicle. Oleg Kotov on screen now, commander of that Soyuz craft and commander of Expedition 38, safely out of the capsule along with Mike Hopkins and Sergey Ryazanskiy. The three completing their descent in their Soyuz craft. Throughout this evening, the vehicle not having any issues. The search and recovery forces overcoming some weather issues to get there and get the crew out safely. So the flight surgeons continuing to take some vital signs quickly from the crew members after they've been successfully extracted from their Soyuz craft. The crew should only be remaining here at the landing site for a brief amount of time before they're loaded back up to head to the forward staging point of Karaganda, where the rest of the search and recovery forces and NASA personnel, along with Roscosmos personnel, will be waiting for them.
That's normal. Yeah. Michael. Sergey.
Michael, Sergey.
Before moving on to their respective home bases, Kotov and Ryazanskiy heading back to the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in Star City, Russia. Mike Hopkins bound for the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas. As you can tell just from the helicopters taking off, visibility and snow conditions pretty rough out there in central Kazakhstan right now in the month of March. The recovery forces combating temperatures in the single digits Fahrenheit, which earlier this morning Central Time, or late yesterday evening Kazakh time, caused many of the recovery forces to turn back from their forward staging point when ice was starting to form in the helicopters.